All right, stand-up comedian Pranit More's shows have obviously sparked controversy. There was the 370 rupee biryani remark, and then immediately after that, as if to show that there was an equivalent between that and this, there was a question about how cadavers are treated in hospitals. Now, this is what had happened. Was a young woman in the audience in one of Pranit More's shows, who was Dr. Sejal Kumar. And when she was telling her personal story, because that's what the show is about, they allow audience members to share outrageous personal stories. She talked about how during anatomy training in KEM hospital involving cadavers, she and her colleagues would sometimes compare the sizes of private parts of male cadavers and joke about it. Now, that clip quickly spread online. Critics argued that it was disrespectful to the body of donors and to their families. Sejal Pawar issued a public apology, but it did not end there. The All India Medical Students Association publicly condemned those remarks. The Federation of All India Medical Association also criticized. United Doctors Front served a legal notice to Pranit More and the show's organizers, and also approached the Human Rights Commission. Reports say that KEM Hospital has apparently initiated an inquiry and also perhaps suspended the student in question for a couple of weeks. The controversy now has brought in a broader debate. I mean, personally, from my end, my point of view is that the 370 rupee biryani remark showed us a fault line in our society as how many men treat women as a commodity that they can commodify and they can buy. And I felt like that was very telling on our society. To equate this comment on the cadaver to that is actually not fair, because in that case, you're talking about the consent of a living person. In the cadaver situation, for me, it showed that doctors tend to be very insensitive when dealing with dead bodies. And the truth is something we all know, also when dealing with living patients. It showed us that fault line in our society. And that is what we learned from the cadaver comment. And all of the hullabaloo over all of this has now maybe been spoken about over and over again in past. But for me, I wasn't able to shake off the idea that we need to talk about how doctors are trained in India, and as a result, how they treat patients in India. And I'm not just talking about what happens in government hospitals, I'm also talking about what happens in private hospitals, in operation theaters, in delivery rooms, how patients are treated, and whether or not our bodies are actually treated like they belong to a human being, or they're just, part of a day's work. So, to help me answer all of these questions today, I have Dr. Sanjay Nagral of Jaslok Hospital joining us. Dr. Nagral is on the editorial board of the Indian Journal for Medical Ethics. He also trained at KEM Hospital. So, there is more than one reason for Dr. Nagral to have this conversation with us. Thank you for joining us, Doc. Actually, I want to understand from you, when you first heard of this joke that was shared, that was going viral, did it surprise you, or were you like, oh, it's always been like this? You guys just didn't know. Has it always been like this?
It also took me back to my own days as a medical student when I first entered first MBBS, the first year, because one of the more dramatic moments in a medical student's life is when they enter a dissection hall in the anatomy department. It's a 17, 18-year-old entering a hall full of cadavers or dead bodies. And can be very intimidating. It can actually be very revolting. In fact, there are stories of how some students actually can't stand it and they even leave the course. It happens in many batches. But I think soon one learns to live with it, except that along the way, there are lots of questions that should come to our mind and perhaps do come to our mind, but they are not expressed. Who are these individuals whose bodies are there lying open for us to dissect? How should we treat them? Uh, the fact that we should be actually in some way expressing our gratitude to these individuals. But I think finally, Faye, the reality is that many of these individuals who are there in the cadaver dissection halls are people from the absolute margins of society. At my time, at least, it used to be those with no family members, homeless, those on the streets, etc. And I think that's also we have to accept, howsoever embarrassing or it is, that I think we saw these individuals from as a certain section of society, which seemed very distant from us. So I think that's what I remember from my anatomy dissection days. Along the way,
Is it fair though, Doctor, if I were to say today that this particular joke that was made about the cadaver on this public platform was a stark reminder to me as an individual and as a patient that doctors tend to be insensitive when it comes to human beings? Is that a fair thing to say?
well, certainly there are areas where we can be insensitive, both consciously, but may perhaps even subconsciously. So you're absolutely right that in the healthcare scenario, so many things are taken for granted, and uh, we need a heightened sense of sensitivity, because after all, we are dealing with extremely vulnerable individuals who come to us. Uh, and that sensitivity is not always maintained. Uh, Again, I think it is also, you know, honestly, I worked in both sectors in India. I worked in the public hospitals for long, then I moved to the private sector. The reason I keep saying that is partly also class, is because I see that in the private sector, people tend to be better behaved, at least show that they are better behaved. But I think there's one or two areas which we are completely immune to, which we're completely unaware of, which is the vulnerability of that patient to their dignity, to the loss of their dignity, how illness can strip you away from your dignity. So when we are examining them, when we are talking about their disease,
Hmm.
when we're discussing in front of them, and of course in places like operation theaters, and of course the labor wards of India are being written about, and I'm afraid, and I'm going to say this, that I've seen that behavior. So I think healthcare needs a
What
heightened sensitivity.
what behavior specifically, when you talk about the labor wards, what behavior are you talking about?
Oh, there have been. Uh, I have witnessed in my younger days women being, for example, slapped uh, when they are delivering, in an effort, so-called, to push them uh, to deliver, sort of bearing down, etc. So the use of bad language and force was at one time actually normalized. I mean, that's something that I must say that I saw this being normalized in my medical student days. In some of the departments, that you shout at a woman, uh, you sort of push them, you actually use bad language, and when we would discuss it, some of us would be told that, look, this is the way to get them to bear down faster, to deliver, etc. I think it's all brings sort of goose pimples when I even discuss about it, but I think it's just a reflection of very bad bias, women to the poor, and I think mindless kind of traditions which are carried down. Somebody starts this, justifies it, and it goes along. And uh, I'm almost, when I look back, I'm almost embarrassed by some of these things. Now, it's in a way, it's good that it's coming out. I hope that it doesn't happen any longer. But yes, in subtle ways, there are still lots of biases. Women are subject to lots of biases. There are lots of comments about childbearing. So in the days of, I remember uh, the population control frenzy, there were so many loose comments about how that woman is bearing so many children, and
Hmm.
so on and so forth. So yes, I think we have a lot to improve even now when it comes to the area of being sensitive to patients, and patients who are vulnerable.
Uh, would it be fair also to assume that this sort of, if I were to call it gallows humor, where there's the dark humor that doctors have when they're around bodies and death and stressful situations, Is it an accepted pressure valve that doctors are allowed to use where you joke in this manner but keep it only among yourselves?
Now, I must say this, that I am a surgeon. I work in a operation theater, spend many hours, and you're absolutely right that some dark humor, uh, some humor which is perhaps borders on inappropriate, is often shared. I to say that it is one way to relieve stress and release pressure, etc., is just one way of explaining it. But I think perhaps we need to understand, and there have been examples of individuals who have been being subjected to procedures under some kind of sedation, who have heard their doctors speaking about their, let's say, their body, speaking about sort of inappropriate comments on the size of their body, etc. And I think we need to therefore be very careful, because what is casual talk, banter, can be very hurting to the individual and the patient. Besides the fact that that kind of casual talk also conveys a sense of informality, which is not at all good for when you're on the other side. And you know, I have been on the other side. All doctors finally will go to the other side at some stage in their careers, become patients, and I have been. And it is unnerving if somebody is making light of things. It's one thing to, you know, say nice things, but it's another thing to have a sense of chaos and informality and banter, which can convey that, you know, you're being taken, your problem is taken being taken lightly. So I think healthcare demands a certain decorum, and we constantly need to remind ourselves of that.
We did talk a little bit in the beginning where you said it's possible to do the training without the cadavers, that it's time perhaps to give them up completely. Explain that.
Yes, I think wherever we don't need to inflict this kind of uh, potential indignity, we must. So cadavers, increasingly across the world, people are moving to virtual platforms to learn anatomy. So why are we dissecting those cadavers? To learn the anatomy, learn the structure of the human body. And now we have excellent virtual dissection possibilities. We have models which completely eliminate the necessity of a of a human cadaver. And some countries have done away with it. Partly could be due to the fact that they may not have so-called cadavers available, but also because it's not a very dignified thing. And I don't see really why you actually need the human cadaver, because there are very good virtual simulation models available now.
Mhm.
Now, I must say this, that of course there are individuals who donate their bodies for
Yeah.
uh, medical science. Increasing number of individuals in our society, and there's another point that I would like to make, that we must keep in mind that people who will do so. An example like this, the public discussion on, for example, this particular crass comment, it's just going to dissuade people from even donating their bodies. The other area where we have really abused, I am sorry, but I'm using a strong word, but I think it does justice. We actually abuse uh, individuals who are brought in for exams as patients. Uh, the exam just goes on and on. There are multiple students examining them, often uh, stripping them of their dignity, uh, sort of pressing their abdomen hundreds of times. I think all this is not really necessary. So we need to now recognize that we need to educate ourselves, but not at the expense of
Yeah.
hapless individuals, the most vulnerable individuals.
Uh,
It's not acceptable.
Doctor, since you are on the the editorial board of the Journal for Medical Ethics in India, what are the guidelines, the rules, the any sort of guidelines that doctors or students have when it comes to dealing with cadavers? Are there any guidelines?
So I'm not very sure about very specific guidelines dealing with cadavers, but there are of course guidelines, larger guidelines about how do you deal with death, how do you deal with the dead, how do you deal with, of course, well, the vulnerable. Uh, So these are partly, some of them are intuitive. Actually, I mean, of course, there is a ethics, there is a whole body of uh, knowledge on ethics and etc. But most of these are intuitive, right? Uh, to behave with in a certain way in the presence of somebody who is dead or who is deceased, in my view, just should be just like more intuitive. But having said that, I think it also comes from good role models. That's one more thing that.
Yeah.
So when we were training, we had all sorts of people who we have all sorts of people who teach us, whom we try to emulate, and I think that's where we learn a lot from our seniors, the way they behave. So when dealing with patients, and I remember this distinctly, we had a wide range of individuals. Some of them would deal with a lot of respect towards the patients. But
Mhm.
there were others, and I distinctly remember individuals, very senior doctors, who would deal with them with a lot of disdain, almost disdain, taking them for granted, etc. And I think that's also something which plays on the mind of a young doctor in training. So it's also the guidelines. It's also intuitive behavior values. It's also what the system accepts, and if the general acceptance of a certain behavior is there,
Hmm.
everybody tends to
Yeah.
behave in that way, and that's where I think we have a lot of responsibility in terms of the entire ecosystem, and especially senior doctors, to behave in a particular way.
Do you think, Dr. Nagral, that because there is such, especially in a hospital like KEM, which where you trained as well, because the patients tend to be in many cases rural, under or uneducated, they don't have access to an understanding of their rights, they have very poor understanding of medical science at all, so there's a massive gap then that gets created between the doctor and the patient. The doctor becomes nearly godlike. uh, is that what leads to this sense of disrespect that patients get in India from their doctors?
Partly yes, and I think it is the same disrespect that happens in society outside medical colleges, right? So it is partly reflective of that, but certainly, because as I said, you see two different sets of behaviors. The same doctors behaving differently when they either are in the private sector, or when some of them go abroad, they behave very differently. So you're right. Uh, I think it's the distance. It's also, I think, a sense of, um, I think, even as a young medical student, there's a sense of that we are somebody endowed with something special. So you have that sense. So that distance grows even
Yeah.
more. Um and unfortunately, that behavior is not. I mean, it actually. I mean, there are movies, right? The movies about doctors, how doctors are portrayed in movies, uh, and how the images are there in the public eye. The doctor is somebody great,
Yeah.
uh, who is a hero, almost cultish kind of behavior, and that reinforces that. So you're absolutely right, but again, to some extent, it's a reflection of what's happening in society. There's no question that we have very distant from many people around us. It's just that in medicine, we have an opportunity to both understand this gap and work on it, because we are dealing with the vulnerable, because they have come to us with an affliction, disease, in
Mm.
trouble, deep trouble. And therefore, it becomes all the more important to recognize this gap and try and cross this gap.
Dr. Nagral, thank you so much for speaking with me today. And I do hope we can talk on a regular basis because these issues keep coming up. And we all have questions about medical science and the ethics of medical science. We don't know where to take them. So, with your permission, I'd like to bring these questions to you more often. And also ask our audience, if you have questions for Dr. Nagral, put it in the comment section and we'll ask him to come back often and answer these questions for us. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Faye. Thanks. Great to be back with you. Thank you.